You're listening to a 3CR podcast created in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.
Evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction, in the fields of bodies burning, as the war machine keeps turning, death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed mind.
Welcome to the Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia on the National Community Radio Satellite. Listen to the Anarchist World This Week, Australia's sacred cow slaughterhouse. Listen to analysis of local, national, international events. Listen to analysis you'll never hear anywhere else.
Welcome to this special edition of the Anarchist World This Week on Christmas Day. Unfortunately, I'm not here. I'm just not here. This program is pre-recorded. Usually during the year we talk about, subjects that are pretty difficult. Now, I want to be a little bit philosophical as it's Christmas Day. I don't think anybody will be listening because you'll all be out there doing things. Some will be positive, some will be negative. You're trying to interact with friends and family members, but there are people out there who've got no one, and maybe they're listening to the Anarchist World This Week. This program, as I said, as you know, is broadcast across Australia via the Community Radio Network. My name is Joseph Toscano. If you wonder what anarchism is all about, an anarchist society is based on the definition of anarchy without rulers, a society without rulers. What gives rulers the ability to determine the lives of hundreds of thousands, if not millions and billions of people, inequalities in power and wealth. So these sentiments are very appropriate on Christmas Day. Because although Christmas Day has been totally monetarised, theoretically, it actually marks the birth of Jesus Christ 2024 years ago. And that's what Christmas Day is about. Now, you'd be forgiven to believe that Christmas Day is about Coca-Cola Man, Santa Claus. Not the green and white Santa Claus since time immemorial, which basically denoted the beginning of spring in the Northern Hemisphere, but the red and white Coca-Cola Man who was, put forward as a figure, an important figure for Christmas by the Coca-Cola Company. So I find it really amusing for the month before Christmas Day to see that the Christ is taken out of Christmas. And nobody these days seems to mention that he was born in difficult circumstances, that his mum, had whatever with God. And poor Joseph was there supporting Mary during her pregnancy. And he looked after his stepson for decades before he went off the rails, talking about equality, chasing the money changers from the temple, humanity, what they call social justice these days. So, I'm an atheist, and I think a lot of doctors are atheists. You see a lot of suffering, and you wonder, what's the point of all this suffering? What's the point? What type of God would create all this? What? Is there some type of cruel bastard, looking out from the sky, watching all us human beings suffer? But see, humanity has a long history in terms of wanting to believe in something beyond their own physical presence, in an afterlife, or if not an afterlife, a reason and a purpose for life. Now, obviously, there are no answers. I can't give you any answers. Is there an afterlife? I don't think so. That's just my idea. There are hundreds of millions of people and billions of people over eternity who have believed in an afterlife. All types of religious beliefs. Because a belief in something outside of us is not something new. We even think some of the cave paintings from Neanderthal times show a belief system regarding an entity which people couldn't see or hear, but somehow had a profound impact on their lives. If you look at the beliefs of creation stories of many First Nations people, not just in Australia but around the world, there's always been that hankering, that desire to believe in something else. So I think it's an innate human desire. Now, a lot of people think anarchists are all atheists and we're against religion. Well, we are and we're not. Not all anarchists are atheists. Tolstoy was an anarchist. He wasn't an atheist. I've known many people over the last 50 years who describe themselves as Christian anarchists. People who believe in the teachings of Jesus Christ, poverty, sharing, humanity, the story of the Good Samaritan. The Bible is littered with examples of people, doing the right thing. But Christianity is not the only belief system that has existed in the world's history. We can look at Aztec culture and the cruelty inherent in some of those religious beliefs, where human sacrifice was necessary to keep the world safe. That was a belief system. We may think that was harsh, that was horrible, but the fact is their belief system was if they didn't do those sacrifices, somehow the earth would come to an end. And blood was needed to keep the world functioning. Then we've got creation myths which are based on the natural reality. I think we've all been in situations where we somehow think, feel, believe there's something outside of our own existence. And Christmas Day is one of those days which gives us an opportunity to reflect. So, as I said before, there is evidence that people believed in an afterlife or another being or somebody, the ancestors, who somehow have an impact on their day-to-day lives. And that showing some respect for the dead somehow ensures the future of that particular group. And there have been thousands of different religious systems. I mean, we're very familiar with the biblical religious system. Well, I am. I'm sure you're not. You may be familiar with another religious practice. The sons and daughters of Abraham and Sarah. You've got the Jews, you've got the Christians, you've got the Muslims. All those belief systems go back to the idea of having a single God. That somehow presides over all of us. If you go back to Greek times, Roman times, Germanic times, the list goes on and on. We see a multitude of gods who've got different responsibilities. Who's to say who is right or who is wrong? I don't know. I make no pretensions to know whether there is an afterlife. I don't believe there is. I don't think there is. But that doesn't mean there isn't. I don't think there's any entity outside Earth that determines how we live. But many people believe that. Many people have a need to create that idea. And although the Marxist, Leninists and Stalinists did the best they could to stamp out religious belief, the fact is that, as the Chinese Communist Party has found out, that you can't stamp out a yearning among the human race for something beyond everyday existence, for some type of reward post-death, which is something we all face, and as we get older it becomes more and more prominent part of our lives. So, to me, religion or a belief system is a way that cultures over time have tried to make meaning of their existence. And who am I to tell somebody what they believe in is wrong? I may say it's cruel. I may say it's horrible. I may dismiss it. But the fact is, a belief system is a belief system. So what is the problem with religion? What is the problem with religion? And there has been a problem with religion from time immemorial. Because when religion becomes part of the state apparatus, or religion, a particular religion, is the only possibility, this is when we see the harm, the tens of millions of people who through time have died for their God. It's no accident. The First World War, over 25 million people died, was workers fighting of either end of a bayonet for the glory of God, King and country. Religion has been fundamental to the way different societies have developed and the way different religious beliefs have changed society, as we saw from the Roman Empire, as it drifted from an empire of multiple gods, many of a Greek basis, into a single God Christian mechanism. See, in religion, you have the same issues we have in real life, in inverted commas, real life, whatever that is. Centralisation of power, centralisation of wealth, the formation of institutional structures whose primary responsibility is to ensure that those religious leaders who find themselves in a position of authority continue to exercise that authority by denying everyone the right to exist unless They take on those particular religious beliefs. And we see it today with the rise and rises of Muslim fundamentalism, Christian fundamentalism, Hindu fundamentalism, Jewish fundamentalism, where people believe they're the chosen race, the chosen ones, chosen by God. The rest of us are just extras in this pantomime called life. Extras. So what's my problem with religion? I don't have a problem with religion. I don't have a problem with people's belief systems. I do have a problem when people try to enforce their belief systems on me because their belief system is the one true God. Let's not forget that religion was part of the trilogy which caused so much suffering around the world as the Western world embraced military technology which gave them the supreme edge in their ability to conquest other people, steal their resources, to enrich their own ruling classes. It's no accident that the colonisation process was a process of disease, carrying disease to areas of the world which had never faced those diseases, causing the deaths of millions of people. The use of the sword to put down resistance, and the introduction of religious beliefs which are prevalent in the invading army, whether it was a Muslim army, Hindu army, Christian army. And then you see the internecine battles within different religious tendencies, within the Protestant and Catholic sections of the Christian church, within the breakdown of Protestant segments into multiple entities, by the Sunni Shia schism which continues to be a significant part of the Muslim world. So you see, religion ultimately is the creation of human beings in an attempt to make sense of a world which can be brutal, of a life that can be full of suffering and loss and pain. It's comforting to know that maybe, if you do the right thing, you'll inherit 6 foot of the earth. But unfortunately in Australia in 2024, most people get cremated because they can't afford 6 foot of earth anymore, because it's been monetarised by a funeral system that is hell-bent of making profits out of death. So, what's my problem with religion? Well, I've got a problem. And I have a problem because I don't know which one to choose. Everybody's promising me things, you know. Eternal life, one with the Godhead, the chosen people, you name it. I've been promised it. But promises are just that, empty promises. How do they know they're real? Look at early humanity as it urbanised. And as it urbanised, we saw religion change from something which was part of people's everyday experience, part of Mother Earth, part of creation myths, to try to understand why we're here, what we're doing, is there a purpose to life? And Christmas Day is one of those days where you can do a number of things. You can go to church if you're a Christian and celebrate the birth of Christ, and fewer people do that. or if you're an Australian, it's a way where people have a few days off. They can get together with their families, maybe people they haven't seen for ages, get involved in a few arguments. The uncle gets pissed, the truths come out, fights rage. I mean, the police will tell you it's one of their busiest times. People who have somehow coexisted by not being together, coming together brings back all those old memories. But Christmas can be a time of love, giving. The trouble is, it's now seen as a commodity. It's another one of those times when people can make a buck. Corporations can make a buck. You got Halloween. You got Black Friday. You've got Christmas. I mean, one of the most surreal experiences I had, I think, was in Japan in 2006 when I went with my family for a holiday during the Christmas period. It was fascinating. Santa was everywhere. Christmas gifts were being sold everywhere. But not once did I see the baby Jesus. It was just basically a commercial festival, because obviously the Japanese people have their own belief systems. Whether it's Buddhism, which is not based on an afterlife, but based on a principle of, that somehow, by extinguishing yourself, somehow all suffering finishes. My apologies to Buddhists if I've, stuffed up that. Or Shintoism, which was more of a religion or a way of life based on respecting and worshipping the natural resources, the natural forces which allow us to survive. And most of early religious beliefs and creation myths are about survival, about how to survive in a hostile world. How does flesh, blood and skin and bone survive in a world which is hostile to it? And it's simple. Collective action, working together, solidarity. That's how human beings outfoxed their animal competition, outfoxed the vagaries of the climate. They were forced to work together collectively to survive as a group. If you came across another group and you were both fighting for the same resources, well then there's carnage. Now I know this may sound a little bit airy-fairy, but the fact is that it is a time for reflection, because religion plays such a huge part in people's lives. Whether it's organised religion with hierarchical structures, say like the Catholic Church where the Pope is God's representative on earth, or whether it's more of a Sunni Muslim tradition where each mosque has an independent, non-centralised leadership, or the Sunni religion where there is a hierarchical structure with a centralised religious belief where the person at the head, like the Pope, has ultimate power in terms of religion and the interpretation of the texts. And let's not forget some of the most horrible human suffering and torture which has occurred because of religious beliefs, of societies being put to the sword, of people becoming refugees in their tens of millions, of millions dying to protect those religious beliefs. Or in ancient Egypt, tens of thousands of people working for decades to create some monument to somebody in a position of authority who thinks they are a living God. And somehow they'll be saved. But ultimately, there is a strain in religious beliefs. There is a strain which is common. And that's the strain which is based on humanity. Maybe not humanity for somebody who has an opposing view as far as that somebody else's religion is concerned, but humanity as far as the people involved within your own religious belief. Whether it's Jesus Christ as its birthday today, knocking over the tables of the money lenders, or taking on Mary Magdalene, or talking about the poor, the dispossessed, the marginalised, and mixing it in with belief in a supernatural God who somehow determines everything. I'm not talking about Jonestown. That was a religious belief. But again, that was a religious belief where those hundreds of people died because of the actions and thoughts of a leader who had absolute power. And that's what a theocracy is about. It's about the state being regulated, not by human need, but the needs to impose a religious belief on everybody under its control and to ostracise, marginalise, expel and murder those who refuse to acquiesce, to believe. It's interesting. There are many people from over 200 sovereign nation states and many, many hundreds of cultures that come to this country. As a colonising society, we need people. It's either populate or perish. And it's fascinating when you talk to people. While many original inhabitants continue, First Nations people, to have their own creation myths, their own belief systems, their own relationships with their ancestors. You have many more which have adopted Christianity as a way of life, because in many regards, many First Nations groups in this country would have been wiped out if it wasn't for Christian missionaries who were in a position to protect these marginalised, genocidal remnants from total extinction. And it's interesting when you look at religious belief, it's not just part and parcel of everyday life in many First Nations people's lives, but it's also intertwined with the colonial experience. For example, in the Torres Strait, the 1st of June is the coming of the light day. So what is the coming of light? When missionaries from the South Pacific, I think the Solomon Islands and Fiji, turned up in the Torres Strait in 1871, when Torres Strait Islanders were on the verge of extinction because of the predatory practices of the colonising forces who used them basically as slave labour. And it was the missionaries who saved this particular group of people from extinction. And the price they paid was the rejection of cultural practices they had performed for thousands of years to be replaced by some straight-laced Christianity. But as the 21st century progresses, we see more and more people, First Nations people, combining the two to suit their current situation. Who am I to say your religious belief is a load of crap? Who am I to say that? I don't know. You don't know. It's Christmas Day. So what's an anarchist problem with religion? Well, that's the whole point. The word anarchos means without rulers. You can believe what you like, but as long as you don't want to enforce your belief systems on somebody else or harm somebody else as a byproduct of your religious devotion, what does it matter what you think? The dilemma arises when we have institutional structures which are created where you have a class of professionals which writes the rules, which sets the parameters as far as your religious belief is concerned. It's no accident that the Roman Catholic Church's monopoly on belief in Western Europe, which had been built since the adoption of Christianity at the end of the Roman Empire, by the remnants of the Roman Empire. It's no accident that hegemony, that power they had over people, came a cropper with the introduction of the printing press, where everybody could be their own priest. Everybody could interpret the Bible in the way they like because it was there in front of them. You didn't need an expert who could read and write, who could read Latin, who could read and tell you how to behave. You no longer needed them. And it's no accident the great schism which occurred in the Christian church during this period, which resulted in the deaths of millions of people as different branches of Christianity were battling for supremacy, not just at home, but in terms of the colonial empires they governed. For example, you go to different colonial outposts and the colonial forces which did the conquest are those that left their religious beliefs behind. The Dutch Reformed Church in South Africa, the Roman Catholic Church in South America and parts of Africa. So history is a march which is not only based on economic imperatives, not only based on that struggle to devolve power and share wealth in order to ensure survival, not only based on a collective type of economic system, but one where we struggle against institutions which impose their will on us because they are the experts as far as that religious belief is concerned. They are the ones who are willing to send us to war to protect their power. Not their religious beliefs, but their power. It's no accident, as the Muslim and the Christian world expanded across the world, that more and more people died as a consequence of that expansion, because they demanded total obedience to a religious belief which was foreign to people who'd had their own beliefs for tens of thousands of years. And it's no wonder that in the 21st century, when we celebrate Christmas, the birth of Jesus Christ, Christ Mass, Christmas, that's what it is, that Christ has been taken out of the manger, kicked down the road, and computers and television sets and wonderful, wonderful useless games and beautiful food has replaced Jesus Christ in the manger. And poor old Jesus Christ is, the little baby, his mummy is running, in the straw. She's rummaging in the straw looking for her child. Mary's looking for her child and Joseph is helping her, because we have decided in the 21st century We don't want this belief, this myth. We want things. We want goods. Our God is Mammon. It's always been Mammon. Irrespective of what the Bible said. We worship Mammon. We worship production. We worship goods. We worship services. The amount of goods we're able to accumulate determines our status in society. Oh, look at him. He's driving a Lamborghini. Look at her. She's carrying a crocodile. Not a crocodile bag. Look at him. Look at the games he can play. Wow. You know, the essence of existence in the 21st century becomes consumption. It's our overriding philosophy. Private investment for private profit triumphs. Mammon triumphs. Religion dies in the vine in the most commercialised countries. In those places where existence is a day-to-day proposition. In those countries where survival is the primary issue, religion becomes important. Whether it's structured religion or religious belief based on the fact that because of your humanity that somehow things will improve for you if you follow us, a set of rules. Whether it's been humane to your neighbour or whether it's, following some type of religious ritual which has been worked out for you. But the fact is the concentration of power and wealth in religious authorities which stand between you and your belief system, you and your gods, is the major challenge faced with everybody who has a religious belief. As far as I know, apart from Jesus Christ who claims he was resurrected, I don't know anybody who's come back from the dead. And I've seen a lot of people die in my 50 years as a doctor. A lot of people. Too many to contemplate. I've even forgotten people's names over the years. Too many. I've never seen a soul. I've asked people to give me a sign. I haven't got a sign. But because I don't believe doesn't mean you don't have the right to believe, and that's the anarchist position. What we're concerned about, what we're unhappy about, what we find difficult to accept is the fact that people appoint themselves or theoretically appointed by God to tell us how to live, to tell us what we can eat, to tell us what days we need to take off to show our devotion, how many times we should pray every day. I find it ridiculous. Not that people are willing to do that, that's their problem. But I find it ridiculous to think that somehow they think I'm the enemy because I don't have any religious belief. The fact is, as an anarchist, I don't care what you believe in. What I do care about is how you interact with the people around you. And what I do care is about how much real power the religious institution you are part of is able to exercise over you, not because of the will of God or gods, but because of their ability to concentrate wealth and power to determine who is right and who is wrong. And even in the 21st century, we have people dying for their religious beliefs because other people somehow think they are apostates. They're non-believers. They're atheists. And believe it or not, there are countries, sovereign nation states in the 21st century where if you have no religious belief, you can be executed legally. And there are countries we have religious theocracies in power which determine every aspect of a human being's existence. And if you don't wear a veil, and you're in a veil society and you're a woman, you are in big, big trouble. Because somehow those religious authorities believe they have an ear to God, and this is what God wants. I mean, God's never talked to me. I don't know if she's talked to you. And if she did talk to me, I'd ask her, what's the point, God? Why have you caused so much suffering? Why do you allow people to die in their millions because they don't believe in a particular God? Are you some type of sadist who's put people on earth and you watch them suffer, destroy each other? And it's not just about people with religious beliefs, but it's also about people without religious beliefs. Like the Bolsheviks, who believed they were the only ones with the answer. That somehow these type of authoritarian societies which are created, these types of authoritarian communities are the very communities which create a climate for what's happening in Gaza and other parts of the Middle East, where religion is used as a mechanism to ensure the survival of autocratic rulers who have absolute power. You know, it's interesting when you look at monarchies, whether they've disappeared or are still here, they talk about a divine right. Like priests and mullahs and ministers and the guardians of temples, they somehow have a divine right. God has given them the right to rule. And who are you to challenge that right? And it's fascinating in the West, as far as parliamentary democracy is concerned, there's always been this struggle regarding the separation of powers between church and state. While in many countries in the world there is no separation of power. And when a religious demagogue or a religious belief has control of the state apparatus, has a monopoly on the use of violence through the armed forces and police and the courts, you see the atrocities which are created by people who somehow think they've been appointed by God to tell people how to live their lives. Just look at the resurrection of the Taliban in Afghanistan. Obviously there are reasons for their resurrection which are not related to religion. But many movements which are created to seize power use religious belief as their buttress, use it as their sword, their nuclear bomb, in order to keep everybody else under control. So Christmas is a time to think. It's a time to look for the baby Jesus. And when I'm talking about the baby Jesus, the concepts which were introduced 2,000 years ago, of the meek inheriting the earth, of being kind to your neighbour. I mean, here we have Mary and Joseph scrambling in the hay, looking for the baby Jesus who's been ejected by the musks of the world, thrown out of the manger, into the straw, about to be trampled by the donkey and whatever else is in the stable, in order for us to acquire all these wonderful material goods, where we can have 120 paid television stations and see nothing of any use to us, nothing that actually improves our lives. And that's the dilemma. Anarchism is not about rejecting the need to believe in something. Humanity has shown from time immemorial they have a need to believe. The majority of people have a need to believe in something outside their own brutish, disappointing existence, something which creates hope. The issue is the institutional structures which are created around belief systems to ensure that only that authoritarian legacy, that authoritarian system is the only one that is legitimate. And anybody who doesn't acquiesce needs to be crushed, eliminated, tortured, jailed, burnt, executed. Because somehow people believe that their religious, the way that they understand the world, the belief systems they've taken on board, that somehow that makes them God's children. They're special. God put them on earth to worship him or her, depending on the period of humanity you find yourself in. So Christmas is a time to think about these things, but it's a time to reject the orthodoxy of the atheist who believes, that's right, they have the one true way, of the political, authoritarian demagogue who uses religion to promote their own well-being, their own power, their own wealth, and uses their control of the state to cause chaos around the world. For far too long, we as a people, through the ages, have allowed those who say that somehow they have a direct contact with God and that we need particular institutional structures to ensure that contact continues and that spread around the world. For far too long we have let them have humanity as its feeding trough. That's right, feeding trough. What a thing to believe. So anarchists reject the structures which allow religious leaders and rulers, mainly religious rulers, not leaders, rulers, to impose their will not just on those they control, but use them to cause dissension and chaos in the societies around them, so they will adopt the same belief system in order to reinforce their power. And it's paradoxical in the 21st century, the century of the digital revolution, the century of, science, that so many people are now rejecting science and somehow finding solace in religious belief. Because if there is one lesson we need to remember during the Christmas period, the so-called time of gift giving, is the fact that material goods can never fill the void that human beings need to fill in terms of understanding or wanting to understand of who they are, what purpose there is in life, and whether acquiring a special set of belief systems and practices which somehow denote you separate from somebody else who's acquired a different group of religious beliefs and practices because of where they were born, who their parents were, and the intolerance that these institutional structures cause as they fight for supremacy above them, amongst themselves, about who is the one true religion, who are the chosen people. If you're the chosen people, you can do what you like, because God turns a blind eye to what you're doing. And for millions of people, billions of people, to somehow believe that somebody at the top of some autocratic organisation can determine the way you live, what you wear, how you should pray, whether you should go to confession, whether you can eat this or eat that. That somehow, if you follow these practices which have been put on earth by men and women, then somehow you'll enjoy eternal life. Eternal life. It's an old joke which is so relevant in the 21st century, the materialist century, where we think materialism is the solution to that void we have in our soul, in our hearts. The old joke is, the question isn't, is there life after death? The question we should ask ourselves every morning when we wake up is there life before death? That's right. That's the question we should be asking ourselves. Not if there's life after death, but is there life before death? And you have that capacity to make that decision. Because every day, waiting for pie in the sky actually decreases the options you have in life. And if you, like me, believe that life isn't a dress rehearsal, then it's about time that you thought about it and maybe started living. So I think the lesson of Christmas Day is that could be the beginning of a new life where you take control of your life, the environment you find yourself in, and you make the decisions that are important to you. Thank you for listening to this Anarchist World this week. It may have sounded like a religious, thing, but who knows? Maybe there's a few thoughts there that are important to you. But remember, ultimately, it's not about is there life after death, but is there life before death? And too many people think they will get their rewards after they die, and I haven't seen any evidence. Listen next week on the 1st of January 2025. Well, I'll be looking at the past and I'll be trying to look at the future, because the important thing, as we all know, is to be involved, to do things, to help the people around you, to be part of that community. The digital world gives you options, but it doesn't replace everyday living and humanity. Thank you for listening to us on the Anarchist World this week, courtesy of the community radio station. Listen in next week on the Anarchist World this week, courtesy of the community radio station. This program is coming to you from the studios of 3CR in Melbourne. The program is podcast. You can access the podcast by going to 3cr.org.au. That's 3cr.org.au. And if you're going to be lonely on New Year's Day, listen to the Anarchist World this week. Otherwise, go out and enjoy the bloody day. That's all I can say to you today. And I'm afraid the program is podcast because I am enjoying Christmas Day and I will be enjoying New Year's Day. Thank you once again for listening to us on the Anarchist World this week, courtesy of the Community Radio Network.
Viendo que el tiempo no se va con sus horas y las distancias nos alejan de esta historia.
minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction.
An analysis you'll never hear anywhere else. Anarchist World this week. Australia's Sacred Cow Slaughterhouse. 10 a.m. every Wednesday. Listen to the Anarchist World this week for an up-to-date analysis of local, national and international events.
Poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh, Lord, yeah.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast produced in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.